In this lecture, we're going to discuss setting up the Android development environment. In a previous lecture, we talked about what Android is and the different components that go into the Android development environment. First of all, we need either a PC or a Mac. We also need the Java programming language, which is a general purpose programming language used to program many different things, from Blackboard to Illuminate Live to Screencast-O-Matic. The Java programming language is a very functional and general purpose language. Now, to tune the Java programming language for a mobile phone, we know we need to add some extensions to it or add some specializations to it to make it able to run on a limited memory, limited power device. And so as developers, what we'll do is we will install the Android Software Development Kit and the Android Development Tools plugin. So we talked a little bit about that in a previous lecture. In this lecture, we're going to talk about what you need to do to set up your development environment. Most of these steps I've already done on this computer, so no need to repeat them, uninstall and reinstall them. I'll go ahead and leave it as it is, but I'll show you what happens when you install things, what you should expect to see. Now, the first step, are you sure you need to install anything? In this course, we're looking at getting an Android app up quickly. And so we want to take away any distractions, anything that might cost us time without adding value. Remember that we have another option that might work very well, especially in a classroom setting like this where we want to get an app together quickly, and that is the virtual labs. We can use computers that have been pre-configured for us with everything we need to develop Android apps, and we can do this remotely, which means we can do this from our home computer without actually having to be on campus. So to do that, what we need to do is we need to VPN to UC by going to sslvpn.uc.edu, enter your Bearcat ID and password, your central login password, and this will start a VPN session. It's usually best to do this in Internet Explorer. I've had better luck in IE than in any other browser. You can see your session is timed for 4 hours. If you were to go over 4 hours, you could certainly extend it and go longer. If you see this sign out button, that's good news. That means that you're signed in. And if you want to sign out, you can go ahead and click that sign out button. So once we've VPN'd, and by the way, when you VPN for the first time, it might prompt you to install some software. But once we're VPN'd, we can access the virtual labs. And you might recall from a previous lecture, we simply click on this icon, and that will open up the virtual labs for us. Now, here's my recommendation for you. I'll go ahead and log on with my UC ID and password. My recommendation for you is to go ahead and set up the Android development environment on your local PC. Uh-oh, that's not good, is it? Let's try again. I'll be a little more careful this time. Go ahead and set it up on your local PC. Probably a good idea to do that, but use the virtual lab as a reference. Or if you have trouble setting it up, just use the virtual lab for class. There's certainly every reason why you can do that. So the virtual lab has everything pre-configured for you, and it's a good kind of reference implementation that shows you what you should do on your own PC or Mac or whatever you might be using. So I'll let that load in the background. And meanwhile, whoops, 1 second please. One trick is it resized a little bit. I want to make sure this is still on the recording. Okay. Okay, so right now what it's doing is it's logging me into this virtual machine. While that's happening, and it's honestly fairly fast, while that's happening, I'll go through and walk through the steps of getting our environment up and running. First of all, make sure you need to do it. I said it's not a requirement for class. You could use the virtual labs entirely or the in-person labs. So if that's something you want to do, it might save you a little bit of time this semester and get you developing apps a little bit more quickly. Okay, the first thing, well, we need to look at some installation steps, right? And these installation steps have been very well documented numerous times. This is an excellent source of that information. So, I probably won't add much value by recreating that documentation. Instead, what I'll direct you to do is go to this URL, and this will walk you through all the steps that you need to get up and running with Android. So I'll go through them verbally here, but this URL is a good place to start. It's going to tell you what you need to do to get Android up and running, and that's available here on the slide deck. Okay, let's remember our components of the Android development environment. We have to start with Java, which is an all-purpose programming language. Now, one caution here with these steps to set up our Android environment. It's not as simple as downloading some executable and running it. We actually have to install and configure several things. So this is about a 5-step process. It's not just, boom, I installed Android and I'm ready to go. We have to take several steps. So if you're newer to programming, that might be, kind of a weird concept. You're used to just downloading something and it works. Well, here we require a few more steps. First of all, download and install JDK 1.6 or 1.7. And the JDK stands for the Java Development Kit. It's software that we can use to write Java programs of all kinds, not just Android programs, but Java programs of all kinds. Now, the Java Development Kit is different from the Java Runtime Environment. The Java Runtime Environment is what runs Java programs. So be very careful here. If you have a laptop that maybe you're borrowing from a friend or something, and you say, do you have Java installed? To most people, that means the Java Runtime Environment. Java Runtime Environment is what users need to run Java programs. And I stress, run Java programs. But we're not running Java programs, we're building Java programs, and so we need this development kit. So be very specific. If you're telling somebody to install something on your computer, be sure that if you're going to be writing programs, you tell them to install the Java Development Kit. Now, the Java Development Kit typically does come bundled with the Java Runtime Environment. So usually when you get a JDK, you'll get the runtime environment as well. So, but the JDK is, if you get the runtime environment standalone, you probably don't have the JDK with it. So, it's free. You just need to go to this link, or you can search for it. I'm going to be using Java 1.6, which is also known as Java 6. Sometimes people drop off the 1 and the point. You can use 1.6 or 1.7. Either one's just fine. You can search for it, or you can use the link that I've provided. Typically, if you follow the defaults, it will usually install under something like Program Files or Program Files x86 and then Java. And you see here is a standalone JRE. Okay, that's typically where it installs. That's fine if you wish to install it there. Now, because it's Java, I, as a hardcore Java programmer, it's what I do for a living. Because I'm a hardcore Java programmer, a lot of times I have to go to a command line environment, kind of the black screen like we saw in a previous recording. And in a command line environment, you can deal with folder names that have spaces in them, but it's ugly. So I'll pull up a command line environment here. One moment, please. Okay, this is what I mean by command line environment. And if I want to navigate to program files, I have to cd /, which takes me home, then cd progra-1. Okay, and that will take me into this program files directory. Now, luckily in this class, you're probably never going to have to do that. You're probably never going to have to open a command window. But for me as a Java programmer, it is something that I periodically need to do for other reasons. So, the moral of the story here is, if I'm installing Java myself, I tend to not put it under Program Files or Program Files x86. I tend to put it under Programs without spaces, and then I'll install it under something like Java, and then we see here JDK 1.6. To me, that's more intuitive because I can navigate from root to programs, then to Java, and then to JDK, like so. To me, that's easier to read. But again, that's just my personal preference. That's where I choose to install it. You can install it anywhere you wish. If you wish to install it under Program Files or Program Files x86 and leave it as the default, that's fine. Okay. So the JDK allows us to compile Java programs. In other words, if we write a Java program, we're writing some syntax just like we did in a previous recording where I put a little greeting together. We're writing the program in any kind of text editor. It could be Notepad or Notepad++, or it could be an integrated development environment. When we write the program, it makes sense to us, but we need the program to make sense to the computer. And for the program to make sense to the computer, we have to compile it from Java to machine language. And that's what the JDK does. It compiles our program. So this is something we need before we do anything. We have to download and install the JDK. Okay? After that, we can install Eclipse. Eclipse is our development environment. Eclipse is where we write our programs. If you remember in a previous recording, I wrote a program in Notepad++. We can use Eclipse to do that as well. Eclipse is a very handy development environment. It has a lot of shortcuts that we can use. It has a lot of helpful syntax. It's really the easiest way to create an Android application. So I have a link here to download Eclipse. The good news is the Eclipse installation, once you have Java installed, the Eclipse installation is very easy. To install Eclipse, all you need to do is unzip it, which means you can install Eclipse as many times as you want. You see here I have several different varieties that I have chosen to download. The one I use most frequently is this one called Eclipse Juno. All that is the unzipped zip file that I got at this download link. So to download and install Eclipse, you download a zip file and then you simply unzip it, and that's all you need to do. So install Java, download Eclipse, unzip Eclipse. Once you've unzipped Eclipse, you'll see there is this eclipse.exe. If you like shortcuts, it might be a good idea to right-click on this and say Create Shortcut, and you can add it to your Start menu if you wish, or whatever works best for you. I tend to just go right to this directory, and then I will double-click on Eclipse, and it will start up. It does take a few moments to start up, but once it does start up, we're going to see this select a workspace, and this is kind of like a working directory, a place where you put all your projects. So choose one that you'll remember, and you can hit browse if you want. You can pick one in the directory here if you wish, and then when you're happy, go ahead and choose OK, and Eclipse will continue to load. So we'll let Eclipse load. As I mentioned, it does take a little bit of time to load. Now, we're on step 2. We've downloaded and installed the JDK. We've installed Eclipse. And what I want to do is show you on the virtual machine what it looks like here. So let's see. Do we have Java installed on the virtual machine? I'm going to Windows key and E. Again, I held down Windows key and I pressed E. Windows key and E will show me my computer or the file system or whatever you wish to choose it. So Windows key and E will show me my computer. Okay, from here, again, a note, remember, I'm on the virtual machine now. I just want to show the similarities and differences between the virtual machine and my own laptop. If I expand C and I go to Program Files x86 and I go to Java, you see in the labs, they actually installed Java here under Program Files x86 Java JDK 170_45. That works fine. That's fine. It's different from how I did it, but that works fine just as well. Similarly, in the labs, if you choose Start, you can choose then All Programs, Development, and then Eclipse. Or you can just type Eclipse down here. I'll go ahead and choose Eclipse. And once again, we'll see in Eclipse, it's going to start up a little differently than mine does, but it's the same idea. See users Jones BR Workspace, and this is right on my virtual lab. The virtual lab, I really like. This is the first semester I've used virtual labs, but I have a feeling this is going to dramatically change the way that our courses work, especially our online courses. The idea that you can go to the virtual labs on a day like today when UC is closed because of the weather doesn't stop you from being productive. So I will go ahead and choose OK. And we'll let that load. And again, you have access to exactly what you're seeing right here under your own UC account. No setup needed. You just have to get the virtual lab software installed on your computer. Once you have that installed, you have access to exactly what you're seeing here, already pre-configured for you. Going to save a lot of time. Okay, I'll go back to my desktop now, and one trick is Eclipse is large and has a lot of windows. Eclipse is large and has a lot of windows, and it's a bit hard to fit on this Illuminate Live recording. I'm sorry, not Illuminate Live, the Screencast-O-Matic recording. You see, if I squish it together, it gets a bit cumbersome. So we'll find ways to work with that in this recording so that you can still get the advantage of seeing the recording, but it's not as cumbersome. So there are a couple tricks I have up my sleeve to make that work. But needless to say, let's go back to where we were. Install the JDK, download and unzip Eclipse. Okay, next thing, that's good enough to get us writing Java programs. But we don't just want to write Java programs, we want to write Android programs in Java. The next thing we have to do is download the Android SDK. So an extra software development kit for Android that's going to take our Java code and compile it to the Dalvik VM. The Dalvik VM is the virtual machine that runs our Android software on an Android phone. Okay, so we have to download and install this as a separate piece of software, and I've provided a link here where you can download and install the Android SDK. Now, when you do install this, remember where you've installed it because you're going to need it. And honestly, this is one case where I do recommend you install it in a location without spaces if possible, because we're going to need to reference it later, and it's going to help a lot if you have installed it without spaces. Let's take a look at where I've installed it. I installed mine under Users Brandon Android SDK. Okay, so see Users Brandon Android SDKs. That's where I've installed mine, and here's what it looks like once it's installed. Okay, you see at the root there's an AVD manager and an SDK manager. Okay. Now, once we've installed that, remember where you've installed it. Write that down. Write down the path where you've installed it because we're going to need that in a moment. So write that path down. We'll come back to that in just a moment. Okay. On the UC Virtual Lab, it's installed. Let's see. Once again, I need Windows Explorer, so I'm going to hold the Windows key and press E. They actually did put it under Program Files x86, and then, gosh, I thought it was under x86. It might be under just Program Files. Just a second. And then, is it ADT Bundle? No, not there. We'll find it in just a moment. It's not a big deal. We'll find it in just a moment. Don't worry about that. So, write down where you've installed the SDK. Okay. Run the executable, install it, so on and so forth, just as the instructions indicate. Okay. Okay. So we've installed Java, the JDK. We've unzipped Eclipse. We've installed the SDK. Now we need to run Eclipse. Okay. So again, where you've unzipped Eclipse, double-click on the eclipse.exe and select a workspace, just as I have here. Here's an example of a workspace. Okay. Now, a couple more steps to go. We're not out of the woods just yet. The next thing we need to do is we need to install the Android ADT. So watch this carefully. This is the Android Developer Toolkit. I'm going to grab this URL. I'm going to right-click and choose Copy, or if you wish, highlight it and Control-C. And then I've already done this, so I'm not going to do it again. But what I would do is choose Install New Software. Okay. And then what I would do is go to, let me see if I can get this to fit on our screen. Just a moment as I collapse it a bit. It's kind of ugly, but that'll work. Work with, I'm going to choose Add, and then Location, I'm going to paste, and we're going to call this Android ADT. And okay, and it will probably tell me I already have that defined. Well, it didn't, but oh well. Okay, and now from the drop down, I'll choose Android ADT, and you see it has developer tools and NDK plugins. Okay, go ahead, select all. Okay, and then follow the prompts. At this point, just follow the prompts. And again, I'll try to squish this together. Next, accept the license agreement. Of course, read it first. Next, 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 finished. Install the prompt. Follow the prompts. So, again, how do we get there? We take this URL that I've provided, or honestly, that URL I got a couple of years ago. There might be a more up-to-date one. Might be worth doing a quick search on that in your favorite search engine. But nonetheless, go to Install New Software, choose Add, and then put the URL here in the location folder. Give it a name if you wish, and then follow the prompts. Okay, so go through that step, and what that will do is that will install, and here I have it screen captured step by step. Yeah, here we go. Here's where we follow the prompts, choose next, next, next. Navigate through the prompts, may want to restart Eclipse, and then we need to configure the SDK. What we just did is we installed a plugin. And this, if you want to get into software development as a profession or as a hobby, this is where Eclipse really shines, is with its plugins. So Eclipse is a development environment, and what does that mean? That means we can write our programs in Eclipse. We can compile our programs in Eclipse. We can debug our programs, or we can walk through them one line at a time in Eclipse. We can run our programs in Eclipse. So Eclipse is the software that we use for just about everything when it comes to programming. Write the program, compile the program, run and debug the program. Package the program for deployment on an Android device. We're going to do all of that in this software called Eclipse. What makes Eclipse really nice is it's extensible, or extendable if you prefer. So, as a developer, you can make plugins for Eclipse that enhance the things that Eclipse can do. And that's what that ADT is. It's a plugin that takes Eclipse, which is an all-purpose development software, and it adds some extensions to allow you to do Android programming. Okay. Now, take a deep breath. We have installed just about everything. We just need to do a little bit of configuration. After we've installed the ADT as a plugin and we've restarted Eclipse, the next thing we need to do is we need to tell the ADT about the SDK. Okay, we need to tell the ADT about the SDK. So for that, in Eclipse, go to Window and then Preferences, and then set the SDK location. Do you remember a few minutes ago I told you to install the SDK and write down where you installed it? This is where we need that. This is where we need that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Window, Preferences, and again, I've already set this up on my device, but you see this SDK location has to be set, and that is where you install the SDK. Okay, I mentioned for me, I installed the SDK in C, Users, Brandon, Android SDKs, and so that's where I'm going to put it right here. And then I choose Apply and OK. And I'm sorry, I missed one step. When you go to Preferences, click on Android on the left. If you don't see Android there, what does that mean? If you don't see Android, that means that you have not installed the ADT, or you have not installed the ADT properly. And that's the part we just went through. So if that's the case, go to Help, Install New Software, and go through those steps to install the ADT. Okay, if the ADT has properly been installed and you've restarted Eclipse, then in Windows Preferences, you should see Android and SDK Location. and you should be all set. Okay, again, let's do a comparison. Let's take a look at the UC Virtual Lab. If I go to Window and I go to Preferences and I look at Android, take a look here. C, Program Files x86, ADT Bundle SDK. Okay, and C, we said Program Files x86, right? Okay, ADT Bundle SDK. This is where they happen to install it at UC. So that's fine. That'll work. That'll work if you wish to use the virtual labs. That'll work just as well for you. Okay. Okay. The SDK location tells the ADT where to find the SDK, and then they can talk, and you can make a new project. So how do you know if it all worked? If it all worked, go to File, New. This is in Eclipse. Sorry. File, New Project. Leave that there for a moment. File, New Project. Okay. Click on Project with the ellipsis, and you should see Android here. If you see Android here, you're in great shape. We could choose something like Android Sample Project, or you could choose Android Application Project if you want to make an application from the ground up. Choose Next. And there are a bunch of sample projects here that Android has predefined for us. Okay. Let's see. Oh, cool. Maps. Okay, let's take a look at that one. That one looks handy. A lot of people are curious about maps. We also have some support libraries. That's pretty handy stuff. A lot of people are curious about maps. I'm going to go ahead and choose Maps. We'll call the project name Maps. That's fine. And we'll choose Finish. I will warn you, if you are new to programming, maps are a little bit complicated. That's not a really good training wheels thing to do. It's not a good starting project. But nonetheless, we can at least try this out, make sure that our Android environment is working. So this is on my PC. Let me go back and do the virtual lab. I'm going to go in. We'll cancel out of this. I'm going to do the same steps. File, New, Project, Android Sample. Okay, I could do maps again here. I could do something else. We'll go ahead and say Android 4.4. That's fine. And I'm going to scroll down. And, well, it looks like we don't have maps on here, do we? I'll tell you what. Lots of good stuff. Let me click on, just curious, let me click on Google APIs. That might give us some more things we don't have otherwise. And do we have maps? It doesn't look like we have maps on here, at least nothing I see. Yeah, not off the top. But you see we have things like Skeleton app, a Notepad app. That might be a nice one to try, Notepad app. Anything else? Support app navigation. I don't know, maybe that has maps with it. Choose Finish. There we go. And we'll give it a few moments to initialize this application. I'm going to go ahead and X out of this window here. Support app navigation. And what we see here is an Android project. This is the skeleton of an Android project. It looks like it has a build issue. It might just need a moment to resolve that build issue. But if you're able to get to this point, you're in pretty good shape. Back on mine, again, it looks like mine has a build issue as well in the source folder. I might have to fiddle around with that a little bit to get it to work just right. It might need a library, or I might need to do a clean. But nonetheless, if we can get this far, we have Android set up and we're in pretty good shape. So before I get deeper into a project, which is the next step, we'll go ahead and cut this off here. We're getting close to the 30-minute mark. So again, a quick review of what we covered. We talked about the necessary steps to install an Android project. First, are we sure we even need it? Can we just use the virtual labs? Secondly, if we do need it, if we do want to install it on our local computer, if maybe we aren't always going to be attached to the network, or maybe we want the practice of installing it, then these steps are install the JDK, not just the Java runtime environment, but the JDK, download and unzip Eclipse, download and install the SDK, the Android SDK, run Eclipse, choose a Workspace directory, go into Eclipse Software Update and install the ADT. That'll take us through a few steps, and then it will prompt us to restart. After we restart, go to Windows Preferences, tell the ADT where to find the SDK, and then choose a new project. Choose an Android project or an Android sample project, whichever you prefer. Go through a few steps to start that up. And as soon as you've started that up, you should have a pretty good feeling that Android is installed and running. Now, the sample apps are fairly complicated. In the next lecture, I'm going to run through just a quick and dirty app, which will be enough to make sure that your environment is up and running. So if you do get a few build errors on the sample apps, don't worry too much. Let's start very simple and work our way from there. Thank you.